One of the biggest barriers to knowing God's will is our mind. Now, somebody might think that's kind of silly because our mind is what gives us knowledge, experience, has our memory. So, how can the mind be a barrier to receiving God's will? Well, first of all, let's understand that God speaks to us out of our heart. Remember the verse in Colossians 3:15 where it says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your heart." And I explained that rule means umpire, referee, make the decision. When we're at peace, it lets us know we're moving in the direction God has for us. It's interesting that Paul, in so many of his letters, the epistles that he wrote to the different churches, he would always open up by saying, "Grace and peace be unto you." The two things he emphasized right off the bat were grace and peace. Now, we can talk about grace later. That's a wonderful topic to talk about and so very important to our relationship with Jesus Christ. I would that all Christians knew about the grace of God and the depths of the grace of God, and I'll speak about that later. But right now we're talking about the peace that God brings in our life. And peace isn't the absence of trouble. It isn't the absence of struggle. It isn't all peaches and cream on the outside. Peace is an inner comfortability and rest that we have from God. And it will let us know we're moving in God's will or not moving in God's will. It will let us know to go forward with a decision or to stay away with the decision. But notice it says, "Let the peace of God rule in your heart." Now, in the Bible, most of the time, there's a few times where it talks about the soul and the heart in a synonymous way, but most of the time it's talking about our spirit. Now, here's where most people go, "Oh, spirit? What spirit?" Because American culture is steeped in the soul. Now, Genesis 2:7 says this, "And God took man of the dust of the ground." There's the physical, natural nature of man. That's our body, arms, legs, stomachs, etc. God took man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils. Now, the Hebrew word used for breathe there is the same Hebrew word that is used for spirit. And John, the 4th chapter, verse 24 says, "God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth." So God breathed his nature into man, and that is spirit. And it's different from soul. That verse goes on, it says, "And God formed man of the dust of the ground, and God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." 3 parts there: body, spirit, and soul. And yet in American culture today, we are steeped at looking at the soul. Have you ever heard the word psychology? Psychoanalysis? Those words come from the Greek word that is used for soul, psyche. And so basically it is elevating the soul. And the soul is composed of 3 parts. It's composed of the mind, the will, and the emotions. And the mind and the emotions can be very, very strong. And in most people, they are tremendously strong, and they order and direct a lot of their life. But God has said in his word that his revelation and his insight of his will come not through our soul, but through our spirit. And it takes a while for you and I, once we're born again, to learn to trust our inner spirit over what our mind gives us. Most Christians today, if they are looking for God's will, they do this. They pray, God, give me your will. Now that's good. We should always seek God's will from him. But then what they do is they look on one hand for the pros of the decision using their mind, and they look in the other hand for the cons of the decision, the liabilities, the problems of the decision using their mind, and they analytically weigh out the two. And if the pros outweigh the cons, then they say it's God's will. That's not how God's will is found. God's will is found by the peace that we have in our heart. I'm at 6 minutes already, so I've got to cut this off. I'll continue the next day.